Hey guys, it's Cece, and I have to move all of my books across the country. So for the past 4 years, I have been going to school in New Jersey, despite the fact that I grew up in Utah, and that is where all of these bookshelves are. I'm currently in Utah. But this is going to be my last semester of college, which means in May, I'm graduating, and I'm going to continue living in New Jersey. Now, I love my books, but I'll admit, contemplating the idea of trying to pack them all into boxes to move them from one side of the country to the other was an intimidating prospect. So I had to make some really tough decisions and look through my shelves and decide what I really didn't need anymore, because if I can shave off a couple of boxes, that's going to be really useful to me. And so today you are here to see an unhaul with over 50 books in it. I have someone coming by later, my cousin. She's probably going to be looking through a few of these, but most of them are probably going to be donated to my local library. That's the current plan. I'm sorry I cannot send these to people. I wish that I could, but I really just do not have money to ship these to people. So I'm going to start talking about all of these books that I'm getting rid of. They are books that I'm sure at some point I really enjoyed, but they are also books that I just don't need as part of my collection going forward and combining all of my books with Janelle's when we move in together. So let's just start on these piles. So there are a few series that I'm getting rid of that I'll be putting in intermittently here, and let's just start with one of those. I am getting rid of the Uglies books. These are books that I loved when I was younger. They were the Dystopian that I read probably pre-Hunger Games. However, it is just a dystopian trilogy, and there aren't really that many dystopian books that I have that much passion for. Certainly not enough passion that I feel I will ever reread them, so the Uglies series is going to no longer have a place on my shelves. I am also getting rid of a couple of books by Gail Carson Levine. Gail Carson Levine wrote one of my favorite books of all time, Ella Enchanted, and I've read a lot of her other books and I like them, but they just aren't books that have stuck with me the way Ella Enchanted has. So I will be getting rid of a couple of her books. I'm getting rid of The Two Princesses of Bamar as well as Fairest. These are both sort of fairy tale-esque. This is a retelling of Snow White. This is a story of two sisters. They're both good. They're both fairy tale and cutesy, but none of them have stuck with me since reading them, and I don't think I will reread them in the future, and that's why I keep my books, so these are gonna go. I'm also getting rid of The Inheritance Almanac. This is put together by Michael McCauley. This was just a book that I bought when I was really obsessed with the inheritance cycle, which I still love, but I don't really feel I need an almanac or any kind of guide to the series anymore. I think I'm fine with just the original 4 books, so this just feels unnecessary as a part of my collection. Another dystopian series that I'm getting rid of is the Books of Ember by Jeannie Duprow. So we've got The City of Ember and The People of Sparks. I used to own all 4 of these books, and then a couple of years ago I got rid of books 3 and 4, and since then I still have not had any interest in revisiting books 1 or 2, so clearly I just wasn't passionate enough about the series, and it's time for the rest of them to go. I also have a couple of arcs I'm getting rid of. The first of those is Dig Too Deep by Amy Algier. It was just sort of tropey YA mystery, and I didn't enjoy reading it. I'm also going to be getting rid of my arc of 3 Truths and a Lie by Brent Hartinger. This was one of my least favorite books of the year, so clearly I have no reason to keep it, but this was just kind of a letdown for me, and it wasn't a mystery thriller that I will be revisiting since it was one of my least favorite books of the year, so this one's going. I'm also getting rid of My 13th Winter by Samantha Abil. This is a memoir about a girl who discovers she has a learning disability, and it was really good when I was younger and I appreciated it a lot. However, it just isn't something that I feel I can get a lot out of anymore, so I don't think that I need to try to haul it across the country. The same applies to My Dirty Little Book of Stolen Time by Liz Jensen. When I originally purchased this, it was a cover buy, and it was kind of a weird ride. It was somewhat enjoyable, but I got to the end and I was more like, that was an adventure than, wow, I loved that. So if I'm not passionate about it, I don't really ever plan on rereading it. So this was a cover buy that will now be going away. I'm also going to be getting rid of the Looking Glass Door trilogy by Frank Bador. I still highly recommend these books, and I still will continue to recommend them on my channel because I think that they are a ton of fun. This is just a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, but, you know, it's a little bit more intense. There's beautiful art in here and good characters. Unfortunately, I've just kind of moved past being interested in these for myself. I loved them when I first read them, but I have no interest in really rereading them, and I think the only reason I've kept them this long is because there is, like, beautiful art in every single book, and every now and then I take them down to look at the art. but that's not really a great reason to keep around all 3 of these books. I'm going to be getting rid of The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I really tried to enjoy this, as I have really tried to enjoy every Neil Gaiman book that I have read, but it has just become more and more clear to me over time that Neil Gaiman is not the author for me. I just don't really like his books when I try to read them, even though I really do go in positively, and I just didn't really care for this book, so there's really no reason for me to keep it. I'm also getting rid of The Hollow City by Dan Wells. I have slowly but surely been getting rid of all my Dan Wells books over the years. I really loved him in high school, but I have just become less and less interested over time. In fact, I'm pretty sure in my last Unhaul, I got rid of one of his Dystopian books that I owned. This is an adult thriller, but it focuses on mental illness as the point that makes the thriller work, and I really don't appreciate that. And overall, I've just become less interested in Dan Wells as I've gotten older, so this is the last book that I own by him, and now it is finally time to get rid of all of the Dan Wells books in my life. I will be getting rid of Burning by Danielle Rollins. This was sent to me by the author, and I kind of enjoyed it, but it was sort of like if Orange is the New Black wasn't as good or gay. I think I did a whole spoiler-free review for this book if you want to go watch it, but I didn't enjoy it enough to return to it, so I'm getting rid of it. I think the same explanation kind of applies to Amelia Ann is Dead and Gone by Kat Rosenfield. I enjoyed it, but I just kept wanting there to be more. Plus, I feel like the prose was really, really flowery in this book, which works on occasion, but for a YA mystery like this one, it just felt like it dragged the story down, and I don't think there was enough here for me to return to this and to get new things out of it. I'm also getting rid of Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. This is another nonfiction book. It was really good when I read it, but I just keep staring at it on my shelves for years and years. I have just moved this from shelf to shelf, never really considering picking it back up again or going back and learning what I originally thought was interesting the first time, so I'm just getting rid of it. It's finally time. Also, A Stranger Came Ashore by Molly Hunter. I bought this when I was in Paris because I wanted a book from Paris, but I really, really didn't like it. So, despite the fact that this is a travel memento, I do have another book that I bought in Paris, and I'm fine with holding on to that one. And the only reason I'm keeping it is because I keep thinking about the fact that I bought it in Paris, and that's not a good excuse for me, personally, to keep a book around. I am also getting rid of Artemis Fowl. This is a series by Owen Colfer. This is the first 6 books. I don't own 7 or 8. These are still books that I highly recommend. I really, really loved them when I was a kid, but more and more I've been getting rid of some of the middle grade books that I owned that I just don't think I'll return to. I occasionally enjoy middle grade, but when I try to go back to it now, I just can't appreciate it nearly as much. And these are just taking up room on my shelf. It just seems unnecessary because I'm not going to go back and I'm not going to reread these. I'm going to go through a couple right now that I really don't think anyone will know about, but I'm getting rid of them, so I'm going to mention them. This one is The Superior Person's Second Book of Weird and Wondrous Words. It's kind of a dictionary of random words that my neighbor gave me, and it was fun to look through, but I don't really need it, so I'm not gonna keep it. Also, Bless Me Ultima by Rudolfo Anaya. I read this when I was a senior in high school and enjoyed it. It was my introduction to magical realism, but I'm not going to return to it, and I continue to find a few new books of magical realism that I enjoy, but it's not really my genre, so there are just a couple of reasons why this one isn't sticking around. Then I'm also getting rid of Peak by Roland Smith. This is kind of a middle grade story about a teenager climbing Mount Everest. Again, enjoyed it when I was younger, but not going to return to it, so getting rid of it. And apparently dropping it on the floor. I've also got Nightlight, a parody by the Harvard Lampoon. This is a Twilight parody. I bought it when I was in my super Twilight hating days, and I've kind of grown out of that, so I don't really need a book anymore to make fun of Twilight for me. Plus, I am getting rid of Gossamer by Lois Lowry. I love The Giver. It is one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book, and this is the other thing that I've read by Lois Lowry, but it has not stuck with me nearly as much as The Giver has, so I'm just going to keep the book by her that I absolutely adore and say goodbye to this one. I'm also getting rid of my copy of The Tempest by William Shakespeare. I'm keeping a couple of my other plays by Shakespeare, but I didn't really care for The Tempest when I read it, so I don't really need it. I'm also going to get rid of a couple of books that I actually didn't get around to reading. So those are Hurricane Kiss. This is by Deborah Blumenthal. It was sent to me by a publisher, just included in a box of another book that I requested, and I've kept it around for long enough, but it's just not happening. I have zero interest in reading this book at all. I also have You Don't Have to Be Evil to Work Here, But It Helps by Tom Holt. I bought this when I was living in London, and I was really interested in reading it because I want to read some other books by Tom Holt, but as it turns out, this is the 4th book in a series, and I'm not going to try to collect all of the other books and read this whole series. It's just not going to happen. So, this was a mistaken purchase. It has been from London all the way to Utah, but it's just not gonna happen. I'm also getting rid of Secret by Lindsay Smith. I bought this a couple of summers ago just because it was on sale, which is never a good excuse for me to buy a book. If it's just on sale, it means that 3 years down the road I'm still gonna have it and I will have never read it. I'm also not planning on reading The Crown's Game by Evelyn Skye. This has just never had a particularly interesting sounding premise to me. I think that it has a lot of potential to just come across as generic YA fantasy. This came in a subscription box and I was really going to try to push myself through it, but after a few months of reading some other super generic YA fantasy, I decided that I don't need to push myself through this one too, and I can focus on some YA fantasy that I think I'm really going to love instead. We should probably do one of my 2 big ones now, so I'm getting rid of all of my Ted Dekker books. If you have watched any of the videos that I made near the end of December, you know that I just read his book. In December, I read his book, Blink, and I found it incredibly and deeply offensive. It was the first Ted Dekker book that I have read since I graduated high school, and it just opened my eyes to a lot of the problems that I had been ignoring in his other books. I think that anyone who uses their platform as an author to be supremely hateful, especially towards certain religious communities, like this book is basically just an excuse to bash someone who is Muslim. I don't really think that's a great excuse to read a book, and it just opened my eyes to a lot of the problems I've had in his other book, so I am going to be getting rid of all of the Ted Dekker books from my shelves, and I will no longer be recommending him. So that means I'm getting rid of Blink. I'm getting rid of the Circle series, which used to be one of my absolute favorites, but has just the tone in which I read these books has completely changed, and so I'm getting rid of these. I'm getting rid of 3. When I read this originally, I hadn't read like any thrillers, and so the end to me was like, wow, that's so original and interesting, but it's not. It's super tropey and overused, and also demonizes mental illness, so I'm gonna get rid of this. I'm also getting rid of Burn, which he wrote with Aaron Healy, and I'm pretty sure that it did the same things that Blink did, so that's gone. And then I'm also getting rid of Kiss, which Ted Dekker also wrote with Aaron Healy. They're all gone. No more Ted Dekker on this channel from here on out. I'm getting rid of The Dark Side of Nowhere by Neal Shusterman. Neal Shusterman is one of my favorite writers, but this is my least favorite book of his. I just think that it goes too fast and it doesn't quite accomplish what it wants to. Plus, there are aliens involved, and aliens in books really aren't my thing, so this is gonna go. I'm also getting rid of The World of the Hunger Games. This is just about the making of the movie, how they made it in general. I liked this when I was in high school, but my obsession with the Hunger Games has long since faded to just general enjoyment of the Hunger Games, so I don't really need a book about how they made the movies. Especially considering I haven't even seen the final movie yet. Seriously, I never saw Mockingjay Part 2. I'm going to get rid of The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. I wanted to read something that was more classic. I read this, and I didn't like it. So, bye. I'm also getting rid of Why We Broke Up by Daniel Handler and Mayra Kalman. This was another of my least favorite books of last year, and while it does have beautiful art, I hated most of what was inside, and so it pains me to let go of a book this beautiful, but this book weighs so much. And there's really no excuse for me to try to get this from Utah to New Jersey if I don't like it, and it weighs so much. And I will also be getting rid of Bewitching by Alex Flynn. Alex Flynn writes really fun retellings. She wrote Beastly, and then she's also written A Kiss in Time and Cloaked, plus a variety of others, but those are the 3 that I own. I also owned this one, but it was my least favorite of the 4 I owned. This one is just a little too disjointed for me, and so I've kept the other 3, but I've decided not to keep this one around anymore. Okay, here we are, at the end. What did I save to show you last that I'm getting rid of? The Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. Well, not the entire series. I never bought book 6, which is exactly the problem. I was reading these books, and the last 2 I read as they came out, which was years ago that I read these. And then people kept telling me I needed to read The Infernal Devices before I read the final book of this, and I didn't really care about The Infernal Devices. I tried to read the first one, and I just wasn't interested. And so years have gone by. I've forgotten everything that happened, as well as just not caring. Like, even when I read these, I really hated Clary as a character, and so I'm never going to reread these to read the 6th book. I'm never going to try to read the 6th book, and I have been lugging these from place to place that I have lived for years, and it is time. It is time for that to end. No more Cassandra Clare in my life. Well, okay, guys, there you go. Those are the 50+ books that I'm getting rid of in preparation for my move across the country. It actually felt really good in the end to get rid of all of these books. It always makes me feel really, like, fresh and happy because now I have so much room to fit new favorites on my shelves. So I actually really enjoy going through my shelves every now and then and just really getting rid of books that I no longer need in my life. Oh, I also did get rid of about 6 or 7 books. There was a sort of safe space for queer teens on Twitter that reached out for donations after water damage destroyed their library, and I dug through my shelves and I found 6 or 7 that I have sent to them, so those are also no longer part of my shelves. They also have a GoFundMe page and an Amazon wishlist, which I will link down below. If you want to help out a safe space, rebuild that safe space for some queer teens, then go and check that out. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed seeing me get rid of all of these books. I hope that you have a lovely day, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!